Thank you so much for coming on today, Ed. It's been great to come along to the IDX events recently, and thank you so much for reaching out and wanting to come on and chat about design.
No worries. Thanks for the invite, Roman. I'm really happy to be here. I've seen the your guest list. It's amongst some really prestigious industrial designers. So I'm happy
Yeah,
to be here.
yeah, it's been great. The design community's been very receptive and always happy to come on and chat, which is one of the great things about our community.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but you probably met way more industrial designers now than me to some instance. But I fundamentally think industrial designers are really quite
Yeah,
nice and genuine and
definitely.
open, and
Yeah,
friendly and curious people. So yeah, I think this is a great thing that you're doing with the
yeah.
podcast. So yeah,
Yeah, well,
awesome.
anyone who doesn't know Ed, Ed's a practicing lecturer in Sydney at UNSW? No, what is it?
Yeah, UNSW. So I do tutoring there, and also do some guest lecturing at some other institutions. But yeah, so I do a whole host of all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah,
busy.
recently you expanded your practice out to community efforts and decided to start IDX. Would you like to speak some more about that
That's
and
right.
discuss maybe how it came into fruition?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's where we sort of
Mm,
initially met. The first one where you came along to the
mm,
UNSW one where we hosted a World Industrial Design Days. So yeah, just a step back, I guess. It's always one thing to talk about what we're doing and who we are. And a full shout out to my two collaborators and co-founders, Esther Razai and Esther and
mm,
Neela. Sorry, always get them always mixed up. But yeah, so I've got two co-founders. So yeah, IDX. If we talk about the community, it's always just interesting to step back. Why? I don't know about your experience, but in Australia, specifically in Sydney, there seems to be a big lack and a
mm,
big sort of gap around the community, specifically to industrial design. So it was really just from a want to connect with other industrial designers when I left a full time
mm,
consultancy role. So I was practicing and then sort of came out into the wild again. And it's almost like, well, where is everyone and what is everyone doing? And sort of it was just from a hope for
mm,
connection. And through the course of, being lucky enough to reach out and speak to some really great designers and knowing some really great designers, it's just this curiosity that go, oh man, like you would really like to speak to this person because you're doing some really similar things. And I think what you're doing is really interesting from this production or manufacturing your
mm,
process. So yeah, it was just really just a real want to say, oh, hey, what are you doing? That sounds great. Oh, you should speak to this other person that I sort of came across. I think you two will get
mm,
along. So from the back of that, it was just really just like saying, hey, how's about we all meet up and grab a beer? And I think slowly from that impetus, yeah, it's just sort of slowly grown, and there's been a massive appetite
mm,
for it, which is not surprising in a way, but then also really comforting to see
mm,
that. Like this podcast, like if you sort of create the space and people start coming and they start giving you their input and their
mm.
feedback and their engagement. So it's just been fantastic, and it's been growing strength from strength. So yeah. But thanks for you. You came down from Newcastle of all places, so there's a massive props to you. But yeah, so yeah, IDX it's been slowly
Mm.
growing. So we have bigger plans and ambitions for next year. But yeah, more. Uh, Hopefully we can do more
Mm.
in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was so surprised at the last event. Like as I said, as you said, I went to the first one. The first one was probably what, like
Yeah.
50 people at the most. It was probably
Oh man,
yeah.
yeah,
And
something like
I,
that.
I
Yeah.
remember when I was like, oh, this is cool, like nice little tight knit community. And then I come to the second one thinking it's gonna be the same thing, and it's like 350 people, maybe more, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess it's probably worth giving the listeners some
Mm,
context of that specific
mm,
event. So, with my co-founders and collaborators, we partnered up with the Powerhouse Museum. For those who don't know, that is a sort of like a design and technology and art space, institution based in Sydney. They're really a renowned sort of and long established institution. I remember going there when I was in primary
mm,
school. They used to take all the kids there, and they have all the exhibits and all the steam trains and all the space paraphernalia. So it's a really fantastic place. But also from my private practice, we've engaged with them on different levels and at different consultancies I've been with, we've always engaged with them and they've put great exhibitions on. So from there, it was a good sort of source to reach out to them and say, hey, we've got this little community group. We're industrial designers and, just wondering if there's anything you can sort of help collaborate with. And full credit to a senior curator, Keaton Butler. She sort of put us forward for a event,
mm,
and the success of the event was also founded on the fact that they provided
mm,
budget and really great staff to help us sort of bring the event to life. But the crux of the event was also reaching out to the industrial design community within Sydney and a little bit broader, and Canberra too, and sort of inviting design studios, practitioners, but in-house teams, to get their team to actually pick something from their powerhouse's vast collection of objects, which is amazing to see. If you ever get the chance to go down to their belly of their collection, it's just fascinating. All the artifacts and objects, which to an industrial designer is like catnip. You're walking around and you want to touch everything, but you can't touch everything. You can't see how it's made or get your fingers on it. So, but yeah, it just sort of invited teams and other industrial designers, curious people to pick an object and sort of just then talk about it on the night. So from that simple premise, we built it out, and then it became a bigger and bigger thing. And then we had industrial design drawing workshops and music and all this. So yeah, all in all, it was just a fantastic sort of an event. It was just a wonderful event, and yeah, the feedback from that was just tremendous. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting what you were saying, how there isn't really as much of a community around industrial design in Sydney as you hope for. I mean, I'm from Brisbane. I moved there recently, and in Brisbane there is very small industrial design community. I think only really what's it called? What are they called? The IDA? Not IDA. IDA? Yeah. Is it IDA? The Australian.
The idea.
Anyway, one of the big design corporations, they do sometimes little drinks events, but it's still pretty rare, like once or twice a year. And I remember when I was like, when I come to Newcastle, I'm going to head to Sydney every time I see a design event, thinking there's going to be heaps of events all the time. But yeah, like realistically, you kind of kicked them off again. There wasn't really too many at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, and once again, like by no means am I anything specific or well known. And actually, to your listeners or anyone consuming this, if you sort of look for me online, I'm kind of just like, very much a nobody in this space. So yeah, it's just really, it's been great in the sense that it came from a community sort of initiative, and sort of just once, not having a foundation or a what's the word I'm looking for, like a remit of any description. It was just purely like saying, where are the other industrial designers? How do we connect and how do we chat? And from that, it has this sort of expanded, and it's been wonderful to see. It's sort of now with this collection of these other industrial designers and with this community saying, well, we'd love to do more, but then also saying, well, what is the potentiality of this? What is the opportunity of this? And it's been great, like from the teaching too, you're trying to communicate the value of industrial design to students. We hopefully sort of now have this opportunity to not only connect industrial designers together, but then promote it to the broader audience. And once again, the Powerhouse was a great opportunity for that too, because it wasn't only just for industrial designers that showed up. There was like 600 people that came through the door, and I would say a good half portion of those were just the general public. So hopefully from those events, there was just an opportunity to also communicate industrial design, because you started. I know now Let's Talk Design is more broad, but initially you studied industrial design, didn't you?
Studied industrial design in Brisbane.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always this funny thing. I think we joked about it, and I always joke to all students and joke to other designers or junior designers and go, how many times have you told someone that you're an industrial designer and no one knows what it is, They think you design machinery or factories or something like that. So, exactly. It's the common joke in industrial design, because I think we also suffer from a branding issue, because industrial design doesn't really mean anything now, doesn't it? So, but yeah, from that, I think it's also a great profession, it's a great thing to discuss and also to introduce to people. And once you do that, like the amount of times that you meet people out in the public, or you go to a party and you go, hey, I'm an industrial designer. They go, what is that? And you just sort of communicate the process and the value that you bring, or what it is that you actually do. Everyone's little heads light up. They go ping, and they go, oh, well, can you help do this? Or I've always thought about doing this, and there's a thing that I've always wondered, why is it like that? How can you be better? I was like, perfect. That's exactly what industrial designers do. We're fundamentally just here to solve problems, and hopefully that comes across in this community building, not only internally but externally. That's what we're really trying to push the agenda as well, so sort of really educate. So IDX, loosely, it's all about collaboration, connection, and education. So hopefully, we're doing some portions of those, some services.
That's great.
Lemonoosh. In case you haven't heard of them, they're a design organization that helps educate designers all around the world so they can stay up to date with the latest software needs, so that they can be competitive in this overly competitive design landscape. Full disclosure, I was provided this software free of charge to give my honest, unbiased review of the product. Personally, I found this course very beneficial. Before the course started, I had absolutely no knowledge of Rhino. I'd never opened the software before. I went from that to having a good grasp of the fundamental skills of Rhino and moving on to the more complex skills towards the end of my experience with Lemonouche. Currently, I've just passed the first major portion of the course and I've already a solid grasp on the software. The course walks you through the basic tools, then slowly progresses you onto the more complex tool set of Rhino. My only critique would be that the tutorials are using macOS, and personally I use Windows, which initially was somewhat confusing as there are differences between the macOS version of Rhino versus the Windows version. But I contacted the Lemonouche support and they were very helpful and got me back on track, and I haven't had any issues since. In the Rhino course, you will start modeling a basic mock-up pot, then moving on to fully modeling the Nintendo Switch. Next, modeling the Bang & Olufsen Bayo Play speaker, a Google concept, and finally, using the new sub-D tools to model a pair of sunglasses. This comprehensive course is a good step forward in your Rhino learning experience and has given me the tools to work on some key projects that I was looking to move on to once I learned Rhino. Lemonouche also offers a range of other courses for software such as Keyshot, Grasshopper, Photoshop for industrial designers, and much more. If you're interested, check out the affiliate link in the description, and a small portion will go back to me to help fund the podcast and bring it to the next level. Thank you. Now back to the podcast.
Yeah, I found the part you said before about how you're saying you're not any one particularly flashy industry. I say don't undersell yourself, but that's up to you. But it's interesting because I started this podcast as a student, and then a graduate. Like I had no credibility. I still have no credibility. But I think the kind of point is in design, I feel like sometimes you can get stuck in this point of feeling like you need credibility and you need to have some sort of credibility.
Yeah.
But ultimately, anyone can give back to the community. Anyone can start a podcast or start a little meetup group in their area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And I think it's tricky being in these industries where, on a very cynical level, you're only great as your last project, and you're only great as the amount of PR and exposure that you get, because we are in an odd industry. It's great that we also problem solve, and industrial design is this fantastic tool for positivity. We also, just make things, and inverse to that side too. There's, design as an industry, it's very much also tied up in around reputation, promotion, and exposure. So yeah, it's confusing, and it can get a little bit, especially for junior designers, especially for me. When I was a junior designer looking in, I was like, man, where do I even begin? Do I need to be recognized or famous to do this good work, rather than just focusing on good work, which, it took me way too long to do in my career to focus on. So yeah, it is hard trying to navigate all this stuff. But at the same time, I think, more broadly, going back to that initial point that you're saying, you just started this, I think it's more important just to acknowledge that, what, you don't really need permission. You don't need to, have a functional permission to do anything. So and I think once again that's another lesson that took me way too long to learn. But yeah, and I get asked all the time from junior designers especially, where they go, the question is always, how do you get a job in the industry? How do you do something? And my answer back to them is fundamentally is well, why do you need permission, or why do you need why can't you just start it yourself, or just start just make a start? And it also feeds back to this other aspect that I firmly believe in, that if you're really passionate about design or passionate about anything in general, you should be just doing it, and then when the opportunity shows up, you're fit, you're ready to take on those challenges. So yeah, a lot floating around, but yeah, fundamentally I don't think we need a lot of permission to do any of this stuff, and it's just great that once you do engage, then it's fantastic where people give you their energy and they sort of engage as well. So yeah, it's a sort of a dynamo, it's a self-fulfilling thing.
That's great. Yeah, it's really exciting to see what's going to happen in the future. Even in Brisbane, as I said, it's a pretty small industry. The same in Newcastle. I'm currently looking to start up little meetup groups in Newcastle around design, because there isn't really much of a design culture here anymore. There used to be, but they shut down design education, industrial design education at the university here. And since then, at the TAFE here, because it used to be 3 years, I think it was 2 years at TAFE, 1 year at university in Sydney. But yeah, since then they've kind of shut it down, and they haven't really been doing it again. So then obviously the culture dies with that. But there's still lots of designers around doing great work. There's the design anthology. There's a lot of really high-end manufacturing being done here actually that people aren't even aware of. And
Yeah,
like,
no,
yeah,
it is.
I
Yeah,
kind of
it's
want to start a bit of a
incredible.
meetup group around that because a lot of those small areas, like, where you're going to go to a design event in Newcastle, you have to be going to Sydney. And even then, you were saying in Sydney, they're not that common. So it's like we need more of these events.
Mm.
More people should be putting these events out there and, collecting community.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really interesting too. It's also to that point around the manufacturing. I guess that was also initially one of the ambitions of a community group, because as an industrial design, my background as an industrial design in the industrial design scene is
Mm,
consultancy design. But the fascinating thing is industrial designers also occupy these really esoteric spaces in
mm,
manufacturing as well, and they're legitimately
mm,
industrial designers. So industrial design, once again, this it suffers from this branding issue. It's a lot of different people working a lot of different industries, and I think that's what is really fascinating. Fundamentally, we all get the same
mm.
training to a degree, but then we all diversely spread out. So yeah, really, it was also doing these community events. I was like, man, I would love to meet the guy who's doing the window
Like
extrusions,
Tom,
who's studying
Tom the
industrial design.
welder.
But
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go. Things like
Mm,
that. It's just like, well, I'm sure they have some really genuine
mm,
insights around their perspective around manufacturing and design and production that as a consultancy designer, that I don't necessarily get
mm,
exposed to, but it's all valuable for a process and problem
mm,
solving outcome. So yeah, so hopefully, and it's been great because there have been people that sort of come out of the woodworks to these things, and because it is a coalescence of industrial designers. And for example, Keaton, the curator, she was an industrial designer. She studied industrial
mm.
design, so that's why she empathized with the cause. And I just found that fascinating, where industrial designers everywhere, fundamentally, but we're so underrepresented in the community conscious,
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I'm very excited for the future. I don't know, as a young designer,
Yeah, man.
I feel like there's a lot of you could see there's a lot of negatives in like the Australian like future. Not in Australia, just like in general working life in the future. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now that you could be scared of, and in some ways, I am hesitant, but at the same time, I'm very optimistic in specifically our industry. I think that in my time, even as a
Yeah.
designer, the very short time I've been a designer and my time at uni, so much has changed, and it seems like
Mm,
so many people have woken up to the value of design, and I
mm.
think in my career, so much is going to change for the better in design. Mm.
Oh man, especially industrial design. And once again, it sounds like I'm a zealot because I am. I firmly believe in industrial design, and I think we are so uniquely positioned. And the example that I always love talking about is when everyone's freaking out about AI
Mm.
and the metaverse and all this sort of stuff. But I think industrial design is just primely positioned to be this sort of
Mm.
conduit between these two spaces. So instead of being reactionary and balking against it, I'm fascinated, and I highly encourage all
Mm.
students coming through to experiment with these workflows, because I can see a dystopian world, when people saying you're living in the metaverse, but then we being people of the meat
Mm.
space, I call this the meat space, we're in this world, so what if you have an e-commerce platform that, you live a virtual life online. Say, for example, that you put these glasses on and your avatar is representing you. You can try on 50 pairs of sunglasses. But what happens to that actual point when you go, actually, I would love these or these objects to be physical, to me to be where in this real space. So what is these new industries, new
Mm.
processes, new businesses that allows you to bridge those two
Mm.
spaces of, once again, talking very niche here, like the metaverse to this meat space that we're in, what happens? And I think industrial
Mm.
designers is perfect because we are right between there. We know, the ability to manipulate digital assets, but then also have fundamental knowledge of, we still need to make things, we still need to know materials, we still need to know process. So therefore, industrial design is just an amazing thing where you like the blood-brain
Mm.
barrier, So yeah, I'm really optimistic for that future, and speaking to a lot of people, especially the last few years has been really tough. Everyone's been
Mm.
really tough, going through lockdowns and economic uncertainty. But from my vantage point, and maybe it's a very uh, um, somewhat of a privileged vantage point, but then having still worked in the industry, it's tough, but it's
Mm.
buoyant, because industrial designers, once again, going back to that point, we are so
Mm.
diverse. We're not focused on just one thing. We're not doing, we can focus on one thing, but that's the benefit of being a consultancy designer. You're across a lot of different industries. I remember, you could be working in packaging, you can be working in tooling, manufacturing, whatever. So, even if you just use a stock analogy, the best thing about stocks is to diversify your portfolio, and being a designer, industrial designer, it's a pretty diverse design portfolio. So, yeah, I think, to your optimism, I do recognize that, and I'm quite optimistic too. And, we do ride the same waves as everyone else, but then at the same time, it just, as an industrial designer, I think we're inherently optimistic anyway, because we have to be. When you're presenting an idea to someone, you have to be inherently optimistic and somewhat naive to say that, well, if you're not, then you go, well, why are we doing any of this? So, I think industrial designers on some level are inherently optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting what you said about VR and the connection with AI and then like the material. We've spoken about that on the podcast a while back, and like you talk about. I remember when I was at uni, I was thinking, I'd always come up with these crazy ideas, and then I'd put them up on like Instagram, and then engineers would comment and be like, "That's not possible to be made," or like the manufacturing flaws in it, right? And I remember I remember as a student, I was thinking, I can't believe. It's that hard to make something that's realistic to make, or like it's just a concept kind of thing. But like you think about the possibilities of the VR metaverse space, like there might never be a limit of what you can make. Like if you think, I'm making sunglasses, these might maybe have, I don't know, invisible components that float in midair. Like there's no limitations. There's no manufacturing limitations.
Yeah, or even at the most basic common level, it's like, well, then you can't design these sunglasses within an undercut, So, but they're basic restrictions that we're limited by the process
tooling
that we've built
limitations
on for the last whatever. Yeah, exactly. So, and I think also, we've all experienced that where the harsh realities of, engineering principles override. But I also think, there's a lot to be said about entertaining this unfettered creativity, at the front end, because there will be times where you have to do sanity checks and go say, actually, we can't do this. But I also really think that it is really valuable, especially for junior designers. You have to exercise those muscles. It's always this thing I tell students when they're doing concept work: never negotiate against yourself. You got to be filtering. You got to have these fundamental knowledge. But there's also a time and a place, and especially at the early on, you have to exercise those creative muscles and just be wild in a sense. Get it all out. But then you do the sanity checks and then the engineering and all this sort of stuff. But it's really hard. Like you should never stifle that. I don't think you should stifle that creativity.
Yeah, it's when we were talking about having this podcast, we discussed both of us have a passion for film photography, and as we talk about design limitations, and obviously in the design community we promote good design and what is a good design and design innovation. These are like the big buzzwords of modern design. I feel like it's interesting, film photography, as we're both designers and we strive for successes and evolution in our work, but at the same time we enjoy the things that maybe aren't as well designed, and that maybe there's a better design these days, but we enjoy the sometimes lacking design that has, I don't know what it is. Like I feel like when I think of film photography, I think of tactile, I think of emotional connection, truly being able to create the photo you want, all in like a mechanical functionality, and it's just amazing. What do you have to say about it?
I think we had this discussion, and I think we geeked out bit too much, but I think we talked about it in the sense of at the core of it is like, why do we still do film photography in an age of digitalness? Like once again, you can make all these connections all you want to AI and all this sort of stuff in digital realms where there's no reason to do analog now. And once again, I'm looking at my film cameras now. It is a pain in the ass. It is so expensive to, buying the film and then developing it and then making sure. But I think going back to that initial point, I think there is, if we're talking about a pendulum, for the last 30 years, 40 years, everything's been pushing towards digital. Even now there's like breakthroughs in analog computing, which is fascinating. I think, that's a bigger discussion. But going back to camera and film photography, I think there's something said to about self-contained artifacts that produce art. What I mean by that is like these objects, once again, I'm looking at my camera.
I should have had one on the desk to
they
pick up.
exist. Yeah, they exist on their own, and that's the thing I find so fascinating about them. Yes, there's beautiful engineering and there's mechanisms and everything like that, but the thing that's really valuable to industrial design, today, if you just use the analogy of a film camera and say that if you presented that or packaged that as a version of a concept, you'll be just laughed out, because it'd be just like, well, why is it so complicated when you can just sort of do these end runs to the same result? But I think, people, as we engage in the world, there is value in using and remembering where the history came from, but also the mechanisms involved and the process fundamentally. And also, I hate using the word craft. It teaches you to hone a skill and hone a process. And on that point, and I'll go on a lot of tangents because I have a captured classroom of students, and they can't run away. So I use student analogies a lot. On a practical level, to industrial designers, I advocate for film photography because it teaches you a lot about framing, lens selection, renderings, and that has a direct influence to consultancy design. But then also on the fundamentals of knowing how three different things, different parameters affect an outcome. So for the people who don't know film photography, the three major things are like aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. And knowing how to balance those, and the best analogy I've ever heard was like a three-legged stool. Each one of those things, you're adjusting the legs in a stool and you're trying to maintain a balance. That is such a powerful teaching tool to say that, you will find these examples all throughout your career, all throughout your profession, where they may seem disparate and disconnected, but once you make that connection and understand that they all interfere and influence each other, just having this mentality around, because then you can extrapolate that concept out even more, saying, well, a project is influenced by budget, timing, and what else, and successful aesthetics or whatever, it could be anything. So if you sort of start understanding these things, these concepts, that they all influence each other, they have a balance, they have a manipulation. So I think film cameras, in itself is a great analogy now, even though they're an analog analogy. It's something that is really useful. So, but long story short, I always tell students, learn photography, because even at the basic skills level, you then know when you're doing a render that you pick a nice 100mm lens for all your nice product shots, as opposed to a 28mm bug-eyed thing. That's why your renders look shit, because it looks like you're an ant, looking at this blown out thing, and your film selection and your depth of fields are all crap, So, on a basic skills level, because as a consultancy designer or any designer trying to do digital presentations, you have to have these artistic sensibilities and knowing where they came from, why we're doing it, and how there's a literal connection from your skills that you gain from this camera that translates to rendering. I think that's, I love film photography for that, and that's why, I think, that's why I initially did it, but then also just, like the manual process of it. So
I don't know. I feel like there's something about complexity and difficulty that makes us better at things as well. Like I remember when I used to shoot digital just from time to time, I always had the different modes, aperture priority, shutter speed priority, but I never really shot fully manual because I never really understood how to, and it was just like, why would I try when I could just use the automatic mode and it would do it for me? But then like moving into film photography, my camera is completely manual. Like it doesn't even have a light meter, right? And it's like the complete opposite.
Exactly.
But by putting myself in a deficit where I had to, really understand how to take a perfect photo, I understood all the complexities so much better and became a better photographer. So it's like, I feel like this can translate to anything, like even design. Like if you put yourself in a role where you're really struggling and you're really at the maximum skill level, you're going to learn a lot quicker than if you're at comfortable level.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting observation too, because, but then, if we extend that analogy and that little concept out, professional film photographers would just go full manual because they don't want to risk missing that decisive moment, what they saw, the decisive moment, the perfect picture, because if they're fucking around, we have these tools, we have the ability to do it. So why would you limit yourself when the objective is to get the best picture outcome? But once again, to your point, and I love how you put it, sometimes it is worth just putting yourself in a deficit, and in a consultancy and a design thing, the deficit, I can make a direct comparison now, hand sketching, like it is such a skill that I've sort of, I do sketch, and I as a kid going to primary school, I was always that kid that could draw. But that was now when I was practicing more, sort of tapered off, just because, once again, from a budgetary point of view, new technologies, when rendering and keyshot came on, man, they just changed the paradigm of like, well, why you sketch and why you need to communicate. But then also needing to understand that, sketching is not just one solid thing, it's skill, it's communication. and you need to do these things. And I know so many junior designers who will not sketch, or they think they don't sketch at the right level, so they sort of they automatically say, oh, I don't do it because I'm not good at it. But then it's also like, hang on, what are you not good at? You're not good at doing these crazy hand renderings of like the 1980 styles, and you're selling an idea, or you're not good at doing back of the envelope engineering calculation drawings, saying, well, this valve goes here and then this little ball goes there. So it's like saying, well, don't sell yourself short by saying that, I can't do certain things, or just because the standard is so high. Sometimes you do, like you said, put yourself in the deficit, just wrestle with it, because it is skill. It is just process and skill. And I think they're valuable things. And yeah, I think perfect examples. And another one I can think of is like doing woodworking. I'm a massive keen woodworker. And my teacher back in the day, a bloke named Stuart Faulkner, he started me off on doing hand planes, and learning how to tune a plane and sharpen it, and making sure the frog's all right and everything, and get the depth of cut and all these sort of things. And you'd stand there going, man, I just want to make a chair. Why are you teaching me all this stuff? But it's so valuable, because then you know that if you can tune a plane, you can square off a piece of stock, you know how to dress it, and then that's the fundamental building blocks of everything. And once again, that idea of process. So yeah, I think any opportunities that that gains some access to that you can hone something, yeah, it feels comfortable. But also, I guess the beautiful thing about film photography, we keep talking about that, is just you get a beautiful outcome. When you get all those three things right, when you're full manual and you're out in the street, or you're freaking, trying to shoot your family and your kids, and all those three things just align, and just boom, and then you get this one beautiful picture. You go, oh man, see, that's the payoff,
And you feel a greater sense of achievement because of the struggle you went through.
Exactly. So it's almost like, out of the 36 frames, the 35 of crap, from that one, it's still valuable, And also, maybe it's way more valuable because what went into it. Is this idea of, there was some level of conscious, thing that combined and from your practice, and it just sort of paid off. So yeah, I think yeah, and I think there's something to be learned from a design point of view. I literally had this conversation this morning with my private client where I'm designing a phoropter, like a optics project. And we're trying to make it as simple as possible, because it's a highly technical thing for optometry, but then we're sort of presenting it in this new accessible format which serves developing countries. So, there is limitations around, well, long story short, don't let perfect get in the way of good, because more people in the world need access to optometry rather than surgery. So that's the whole premise of the work that I did. But yeah, we got to the point where we were sort of negotiating. It was like, we want to make it as simple as possible, but then also the better design, the better product that I was trying to promote as a concept took an element of learning, and there was some basic calculations involved, but then with the mentality goes, no, we just need to make it as simple as possible, because on some level we need to treat, almost pander to the lowest common denominator person, which is not wrong when you're trying to give access to a lot of things. But I think, there is room to navigate and go, well, people can learn things, people can navigate things, and maybe the discussion needs to be, once they learn, once they navigate, the payoff is so great. But I guess it also falls down to this mass consumer culture that we're trying to appease everyone, the most amount of people. So yeah, so once again, they're the things that industrial design is always, having to wrestle with. Is it the best design outcome, or is it just like massive compromises to serve as many people as possible, So and yeah, I think in some instances that's probably easier in the digital space, because then you can sort of try so much different things. But from a physical object point of view, where you're so hyper focused on investing in one physical object, yeah, I can see that's part of the skill as well, part of the trickiness of being an industrial designer.
And I suppose that's kind of the dark side almost of minimalism in a way. Like, minimalism is obviously this big topic, Philip Stark minimalism, like, like all these famous designers in the past who've, had that almost as like a doctrine for their design practice. But there is a darker side to it. Like, sometimes in the minimalism, you can lose detail and you can lose functionality. And like, I feel like sometimes in the modern day, I see this little item that has one button, and that button does everything. And you're like, if this just had one more button or two more buttons, maybe it would be a more functional product. And it's like, you can lose that.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I'm glad you point out Philip Stark, because we all experienced the lemon juicer, the very iconic thing, beautiful object. But then I think that's a great sort of example, and not to throw shade on a beautiful piece of iconic design, it is this, reductionist simplicity. But then when you apply the what I call the motion of the user, where they impart their own physicality on things. For that juicer example, if anyone's ever used it, it rotates and it flicks around. It doesn't serve its primary function. But yeah, I guess that's probably a very not a fair comparison, because that is more of an object. But yeah, take that and extrapolate that out to any other aspect, and you trying to dissect the brick for designing a mechanism or designing a platform or a system. So yeah, I think it's a fine line to navigate. But then also, going back to that point around the three-legged stool analogy, sometimes things are out of our control as industrial designers, because then it's like, well, it's too expensive, too complicated. We don't have the access to the material, the technology, so therefore you have to sort of navigate it as best you can. But yeah, to that observation, I think we tend not to. I don't know. I'm guilty of it, where we also tend to underestimate the end user. So it's always tricky. It's always a tricky thing, because then also when we do user testing, even when you do a sample base, you can really only budget for however many, like maybe 50 max if you're lucky. If you're doing something, of a big commercial release. But then even then, it's like, well, that's only 50 people that signed up, that did this. So yeah, there has to be a level of trust and optimism. Going back to that idea of optimism. So I'm always hoping, that people would put in the effort to learn and to understand something. But then also, man, consumers are harsh, because, in this consumer world that we're in, if it doesn't work initially, then it's all written off, and it's just like, it's crap. It's a crap piece of design, So yeah, so it's a tricky spot to be in, where you're trying to serve as many people as possible, but then having so many other factors that sort of dictate that serving.
Moving on from there, obviously we mentioned film cameras.
Sure.
One thing that I have noticed in the modern day of vintage designs that have come back, it always seems to be some sense of nostalgia that gets people. Like records is one of them. Like I didn't grow up with records, but when you talk to someone who did grow up with it and they've got back into vinyl after all these years, they have such a nostalgic connection to it. And like, I mean, I have records and I feel like I've built that nostalgic connection even though I didn't grow up with it. And obviously nostalgia is very powerful in and a very successful design tool in modern design. Do you see more products that are associated with nostalgia coming back up in the years to come?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think nostalgia always plays a part, but what is nostalgia? Nostalgia, almost, you could sort of dissect it. It's tradition, it's familiarity, it's, comfort, it's a whole host of different things. It's familiar, yeah. But I think, nostalgia, we examine in that point, it's almost, I would say it's not nostalgia for a bygone era, it's a want for simplicity to a degree, or a want from disconnectedness. That's the way I see these push towards, once again, going back to these analog experiences. It's just this idea that I love watches. I love mechanical watches. Not because, once again, same deal, like it's so complicated. They don't keep perfect timing. But you don't need an app update. You don't need a battery. You don't need to be on a subscription plan. You don't need to, worry that it's going to have digital cancer, which is like, in the next 5 years, it's like I've got digital cameras that I don't know what to do with now, because, the sensors are so old, but also it's in this weird phase that it's not a vintage thing anymore. It's just rubbish. It's just clutter, So it's a want for that, where things exist on their own. So that's the way I approach it. And that's the way that I sort of find it really interesting. So, so nostalgia definitely plays on that. You do want to use as many of these sort of psychological tools or these empathetic approaches when you're considering, presenting a concept or presenting a piece of design. And nostalgia, or once again, this singularity of compactness, or this self-contained nature. So, it's a really interesting thing that you observe.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see, the future of design. Like when you're in university, you're taught to innovate and you're taught to create innovative solutions. It's kind of part of the design process. We don't just create things that sometimes you're just creating another water bottle, but, in university specifically, when you've got free design, you're not as controlled with constraints, you create things that are innovative and things that are different. But like, that's not necessarily always what people want. Like people don't always want something that's different. Some people want something that maybe was great, 20 years ago or 100 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
going to be interesting to see like the future of design, whether designers will be more integrated into the design of older products, bringing it into modern day.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, and just sort of bed down on that, I think you can sort of take it to its core
Mm,
logic. It's like, well, what people want is something that functions. It
mm,
works. People want something that works. So if we look at a water bottle, for example, then yeah, it has to work in a certain way. If you design a water bottle with a very narrow
mm,
spout, then it's not a
mm,
pleasant drinking experience. So I think that's the interesting thing looking back on history, because the diameters have the diameter for a spout that has landed for a certain reason because of the cap
mm,
closures and all the thread standards or whatever. But yeah, I think from that you can learn that, well, if it doesn't perform its functional primary task, then it's not a good piece
mm,
of design. And that's the great thing about being able to look back and go, well, we can see history here, years of bottles and years of best practices. Now, what do you
mm,
do on top of that, to tailor towards the new uh, 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 methods of production, new materiality, or new consumer
mm,
sensibilities. So I think that's the really interesting thing about, and going back to your initial point, why people want nostalgia. I think people just look back and go, well, what can we
mm,
reference and what can we sort of learn from? And I think that's where also good design comes into, what can we learn from the
mm,
past, and but then how do we I always say 1+1. Creativity is basically 1+1 = 3. It's not 1+1 = 2. It's not the
mm,
logical outcome. It's like two disparate things that you combine, and it's like now a new third
mm,
thing. So I think that's the amazing thing about industrial design and design in general, and creativity and problem solving. It's just like saying, well, potter's been done forever, so what can we learn
mm,
from this? Well, there's always something, and I think that's that's fundamentally, the challenge, but also the exciting part when you do pull it off. You get that third thing, it's amazing. So yeah, but yeah, to that point, I think it's an observation that I think is really
mm.
interesting too. Yeah.
You mentioned, that reliance on the past and I suppose history to one.
Mm,
I
mm.
when I graduated and I had all this free time, I really got stuck into design history. I don't know why. I just found this. There's this
Nice,
YouTuber,
nice.
I think his name's Jason Bird. Have you heard of him? He's a lecturer.
Oh no, I
Yeah,
have actually. I've
yeah,
have
and he
heard of
has
him.
like a
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
series
yep.
on just like industrial design history. It's amazing. If you ever have some time, you should watch
So
it.
cool.
But I found it amazing, and learning the history of how these products came to fruition. What was the design challenges? What were the material and
Yeah.
manufacturing specific needs that created the reason why that product has that specific detail? Like it I don't know. I feel
Yep.
there's definitely something in designers learning the historical background of the products we design.
Oh yeah, and I think that is such an interesting thing, because when you're trying to formulate a conceptual
Mm,
direction, what are you grasping at? Are you trying to generate new narratives to justify your direction, or is it more potent and powerful to say that, well, I love those pieces of design. Whenever you come across anything that has a historical meaning or there's a functional meaning, it's going to be a little bit weird of a tangent, but I saw these tool, basically like they're circlip tools that I came across, and once again, this is a terrible thing to try to describe a physical object on an audio platform, but regardless, it's a cylinder basically with a little tip that's been offset, but it created this beautiful shape from this tip. But then you're looking at it as a very complicated shape. But then you go, well, why is that? How is this generated? And how could I replicate this? But then when you sort of look at it, and this is a very long bow to draw from a historical context. But then at the same deal, you look at this singular example, you draw back to, well, how was it
mm,
made? It was because it was chucked in a four-jaw chuck and it was eccentrically machined. It gave you this resultant force. Then you could say, sort of take that once again, this same thought process, and go, well, this jug or this bottle shape, it was because it used to be stored on
mm,
ships, whatever, and it had to have these sort of fasteners to stop it jutting around. But then skeuomorphically it's been carried through the history, and then now we've got these sort of resultant shapes of history, and skeuomorphism is like a wonderful idea. I don't know if any of your listeners have
mm,
not heard about it. Is this idea of just like a perfect example is probably more relevant in graphic design these days. Like when I say phone, what's the
mm.
icon that you sort of remember when you think about? When I say phone, what do you think about when you say phone? What's the icon of a phone?
Of the symbol of a phone or of just any icon that's on a phone?
Yeah, the symbol of a
Um,
phone. Yeah.
I don't know. I probably think like the Apple symbol. I don't know why. Like, which is silly because
Well,
that's a
no, the
brand,
Apple.
but it's just.
Well, I guess if we sort of, to make a direct connection, it's like when your iPhone flashes up with someone's call, when you
Mm,
hang up, what is that little symbol that dictates that you're about to answer a call? It's a little dog and
mm,
bone handle, the old
yeah.
school
Mm,
thing. Once again, no one ever uses
mm,
that now. It was very, very rare. I've got kids, and you show them that, they would have no context of where that came from.
mm,
They go, "Why is this funny shape?" But that funny shape represents talk
mm,
time. Pick up, speak to someone, connect with someone. Audio comes through this magic black thing that you can speak to someone. So yeah, so that's an idea of skeuomorphism. I'm pretty sure that's
mm,
what it is. But yeah, it's this historical thing, but then we've become so accustomed to it, and we've learnt it. Once again, we've learnt it, but now it's so hard that you can disassociate
mm,
it from it. That it's almost impossible to come up with a new phone icon. Maybe maybe 100 years down the line, it'll be a rectangle, with soft corners, and that would be the
strip
new symbol
everything
for a
back to
phone. Also
simplicity.
connect with someone. Exactly. But then, going back to that point, yeah, from an industrial design point of view, history, it's just amazing resource.
Mm,
It's an amazing resource to connect with ideas and I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but when you're in the depths of the despair of the curve of successful projects, but you're right at the start, you're in the
mm,
despair area. You go, I've got no ideas. I'm a fraud. I don't know what I'm doing. There's nothing coming, and you're just freaking out. But that's where the opportunity there's to go, well, actually, you're not the first one to
mm,
do this. These problems aren't unique to some ability. If you ever get the chance to do really unique design challenges,
mm,
amazing. But, to be frank, when you're a consultant designer, maybe, 90% of the time you're sort of refreshing things for modern
mm,
tastes, but then also they're new to you because I've never designed, a mouse before, or a speaker,
mm,
whatever, so you're still trying to come up with problems, solve
mm,
problems. So it was like, where do you do it? Like, if you're an amazing genius, it can come from internally, but then also us mere mortals, we have to look for other points
mm,
of influence. So I tend to really look for history and look for cultural context, and this is also like another bigger topic because culturally, we're all still very Western centric. We're looking back to industrial revolution. Our name comes from the industrial
mm,
revolution to a degree. But then what happens when the lens is flipped from a cultural point of view? Well, what happens when you look at 2,000 years in the Qing dynasty? What can be learned from there? And there is things that still trickle through, but once again, it's very powerful when you can
mm.
identify it and make those direct connections and bring it into your work and bring it into your practice. But yeah, the history, it's such an amazing source of inspiration. But going back to that IDX event at the Powerhouse, that was one of the hopes. Like, it was great seeing some of those teams pick things so random and esoteric, but it was from the distant past and very
Mm.
past, and they sort of talked about, well, what was the relevance and what still resonates. So that was wonderful to hear those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing about the past, I don't know, I feel like when you pick up an object of the past that was successful, or it wasn't even successful, just you go to an antique shop and you see some, like, even
Mm.
I'm thinking like the old iron irons, like it's a block of iron.
Nice.
I don't know. I just feel like there's more emotional connection with items of the past. I feel like sometimes with
Interesting.
modern products, they've been simplified so much with their soft edges and all these different design
Mm.
principles that it seems like the whole of, specifically the tech
Mm.
industry has
Mm.
adopted. There's some loss of emotional
Mm.
connection with modern day items. Personally, I find that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really interesting observation. And I think going back to that
Mm,
tech analogy, because a lot of the heavy lifting is not so much embodied in the
mm,
object anymore; it's embodied in the
yep,
system and the
mm,
software. Because they're almost one in the same. Specifically, we're talking
mm,
about tech, but to that example of the iron has to exist on
mm,
its own. It has to retain heat. It has to be
mm,
held. It has to do the ironing. So and it's so amazing because there was a design that was an outcome that now you can so easily
mm,
understand. Oh, that's the handle. That's the pointy bit
mm,
which you jam into the crevices. So there is something, once again, going back to our discussions around film camera, that I think there is a yearning
mm,
for that to understand. And also, I think it's just something really amazing that it exists on its
mm,
own, and it's independent of everything else, So, yeah, I think that's actually, it warrants a lot more thought. But yeah, software and tech, I think that's such a unique position that we're in, you know, where we can rely on the tech to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Even if the hardware is falling down, it can override it with good user experience and a good UX design and a good performance and refresh rates and all this sort of stuff, you know. So yeah, I think that's really interesting observation. But yeah,
we talked about AI before. I saw this thing the other day about ChatGPT, and this school in America, they put in ChatGPT, tell me which books I should blacklist on my school, on my, like, you know, school's network, basically to ban from students. And they just, like, it just spit out this list, and then they did it. And like their explanation was like, you know, we're too busy to be doing that kind of stuff. Like, why wouldn't we just offsite it to a robot? Or, you know, obviously there's like negatives of that. You could argue that why did the AI decide that book was not allowed, and like why is it controlling that flow of information, and what effect that's going to have on the future. Do you worry about the effect you know, AI moving into the design industry could have on people being maybe too lazy and not as committed to you know, personal perseverance around something, that they might just offsite those kind of skills to AI?
yeah, oh yeah, 100%. You know, like, I guess, yes. And the way that, you know, from my vantage point, consuming all this stuff, that argument or that intellectual framework can only happen if you're already in a position where you are operating at a very high level, and therefore you then devalue anyone else getting into the space because they haven't put in the hard yards, or they haven't got the skills, or they haven't earned it to some degree, you know. So there is that argument to be made, because going back to everything we just talked about, the fundamental skills that you still need, that is part of the process, and it's hard, and it is not, doesn't seem fair when someone just sort of comes in and sort of, if we use the camera analogy, just produces a thing without any thought or any intent to a degree, or very limited intent, and it just happens, and it's of the same quality of something that you've taken. You know, it's not the immediate time you, it's the years that you've learned to build up these critical skills. Yeah, of course there is that. But inverse to that, I can see the other view where, man, if we use movies for an example, what about the mum that, you know, she's an inherently fundamentally an amazing storyteller, but she's never had the opportunity to present an idea to a studio that gets turned into a movie, that then gets put resources to do filming and photography and art and all this sort of stuff. And she had the ability to actually just create a story with the tools that are very accessible to everyone. You know, if we just look at the outcome, you know, I would want to see that. I would want to see her point of view, which traditionally in a hierarchical a culture where you have to earn, you have to learn, you have to pay to play to a degree, and you have to have these paths. With AI, now these ability and these access to these tools, because fundamentally they're still tools, you know, gives people these opportunities to express themselves and engage. And yeah, I think the optimistic side of me, I think that's really exciting. So yes, you know, like the Luddites, you know, the people in these very prestigious cropping circles who are cutting the cloth, and then these machines came in. They felt it very acutely because they have massive invested interest in not, you know, promoting this technology or fostering this technology. But then also, so many more people got access to beautiful, you know, textiles, and so much more people got into it. But that's a complicated analogy, that one, because. But yeah, to that point, AI, I think it's tricky. It's tricky, but at the end of the day, it's coming. You can't stop it. So you either work it into your process, understand it, and sort of see where the opportunities are, rather than trying to circle the wagons, protect what's yours, and sort of almost trying to hold back the flood, you know, as long as possible, and to keep yours as long as possible. But yeah, it's coming, and it's not changing. And once again, you know, this is my personal opinion. I always tell my students, use it. I want to see it, but the preface is, I want to see you working out. I want to see how you came to your conclusion. I want to see the inputs and the generation of the ideas. And once again, to that idea of 1 + 1 = 3. Well, what was these two separate things? You know, now what is it? It's not an influencer. It's a what do they call it? Like prompters now? Like you're a prompt. You know, you're a I can't remember. They're like a prompt smith or something like that, some weird name. But they have these abilities to navigate. It's not just I've tried it. For those who haven't played with it, it's really difficult to get a good outcome. Like especially with Midjourney, trying to do the prompts, and there is layers of understanding when crafting. You have to use modifiers and all this sort of stuff. So there is a level of skill, But for the students, I'm all for it. Yes. Be very cautious, because then it's one thing when you generate something, then there's no substance because you've produced the outcome, and that's dangerous, because then when everyone is critical on that and they start examining, if you can't back that up, then you're in a bad spot, But at the same time, for those people who are very focused and they can use it, they can incorporate it into their process, and they can sort of rationalize it and then use it to augment what is inherently there anyway. I think it's just an amazing, powerful thing. So yeah, it's coming. You can't change it. I'm all for it. As an industrial designer, I also think it's going back to that initial discussion, initial thing that we talked about, where I think we're in a very unique spot, because we deal with physicality. We deal with physical things, or traditional industrial design, quote unquote traditional industrial design. So yeah, I think specifically for us, I think it's going to be really interesting. It also speeds up process. I can't wait to the day where my hand sketches, and it's happening now, where my hand sketches get generated into, very loose concept CAD models that then I can sort of really start doing my renderings and engineering measurements and all this sort of stuff. So it's coming, and I think we need to sort of adapt and evolve, and industrial designers are once again perfectly primed to sort of roll with this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Unfortunately, I think the necessity for amazing hand renderings may be lost in the coming years. Like as you said, like already with Clipshot, you can debate that it's maybe not even as useful anymore. I still think it's an amazing craft, and I wish I could draw to the level of the the Instagram hand sketches. I'm more of a functional sketcher for for functional reasons. But but even like with the days of what's the new AI sketching program where it will convert your sketches? What's it called?
Oh man, there's so many. I've lost track. I think I'm played around.
But
with
I just think like it's going to be very soon before you can just sketch a very rough idea and you'll have a beautifully rendered version of it.
Yeah. But once again, and making these beautiful connections to our previous conversation, it's going to get to a stage where it's like photography. There is always inherently going to be a portion of the public, or the people who genuinely want to hone their skill and hone their craft. And the purist, exactly. But then once again, it's like saying, well, filmography is still around. People still, like you and I, we still suckers for the punishment, but it's still valuable. There is still lessons to be learned. And talking about hand sketching, I was in Canberra not too long ago, caught up with Dan Smith, Dan Armstrong. You've had him on the thing, but he graciously took me to UC, University of Canberra, and their workshop manager there, the name of Bill Shelley. Fucking incredible sketcher. Like, holy crap, I saw his old school stuff that he was drawing in the 80s, and it was just phenomenal. If you imagine industrial design sketching, it is that, and he used to do it. But you're right, there is very limited application of that now in a very competitive and hyper competitive space where budget dictates a lot of our design process. It's speed, it's all speed. But then at the same time, and once again, it was such a shame that I didn't get to have a bigger discussion. There is still things to be learned from that skill application. Yes, it is sort of a redundant process, but what is the through line here? You're still doing the design, you're still applying skill. What does it look like now? But what is the important thing to remember? The important thing, once again, from a camera point of view, is like lens choice, ISO, aperture. But from sketching, it's understanding brain-to-hand connection. It's expression and communication. They're commonalities, and to you, how far you want to take that. If you have natural God-given talents and you can just sort of expressly do it, then that's great. But then I think there's, at a fundamental level, don't worry, don't discard yourself saying, I can't sketch. I think at the basic level as an industrial designer, we all sketch. We have to sketch, because it is just a communication tool. But once again, we're now in a world where, imagine we had this conversation like maybe 30 years ago. Maybe it was like, well, you have to be a really shit hot sketcher to even get your foot in the door. If you don't know how to friggin' work your Copics, then no thank you. But now, because we have all these tools, exactly, you get your airbrush out, you get your masking things, and My previous life, I was a draftsman, mechanical draftsman. So, and I was right on the cusp with drawing boards and ink pens and stuff like that. But then AutoCAD, that was my bread and butter for a long time. But yeah, to that point, you know, once again, to that example of the mum who could tell a beautiful story, it's like, I think also the change in technology and the change in industry affords a lot more access, you know. And it's always the case when we're at the pinnacle of the time that we're in now. It always seems either unfair or uncertain. But then if we look historically, you know, I think we've come a long way and it just morphs. But then you'll be foolish not to retain those things, you know. Yes, you don't need to operate at that crazy high level, but it's still important to bring those things through. And those little things stack up to a whole bunch of things, you know, and hopefully we're all just better designers because we have the benefit of looking back historically. And, you know, if we ever look back on this conversation 50 years from now, people are like, man, what are they talking about? Did they still draw things with their hands? But I still think fundamentally there is a need to be able to communicate from your brain to your hand or some other way, you know. So, and then that's the interesting stuff. I think as industrial designers, we don't talk enough about, but these are the things that seem very vague as why are they such a better designer, or how can they do something like that? And I think a lot of these discussions, especially what you're doing, I think that's the interesting thing, because there's these obscure things that are useful, but then they're so relevant at the same time.
Yeah, sketching's a big one. Like when I was in university, I probably didn't put sketching in the biggest pedestal that I probably should have, and graduated and then was like, you know, I need to be better at sketching basically, and spent, you know, actually, you know, a consistent time every day, every few days, like just sketching things I saw around. And, you know, now I'm at a pretty decent level. Like I'm not a crazy renderer, but, you know, I'm at the level I need to be for my job. And, you know, when I'm in a meeting with project managers, I can sit there and sketch out my ideas and be like, what do you think about this? And, you know, I'm getting better at it as well, putting myself in that deficit, being there in front of someone, like having to sketch something and communicate it to them. You know, when you're put in that situation, you have to be better.
Oh man,
As someone in the education field, do you notice that students aren't really, you know, thinking of sketching as important as it needs to be, and, you know, maybe some other skills that you feel like they're lacking?
Oh, definitely. When I studied, you know, we had dedicated sketching classes, and the people of my generation, the guys that I work with now, they had a dedicated class. It was just for sketching. And once again, it's not an indictment on any institution, but it's rarer and rarer where they invest in that, because it's like this idea of economics. If you invest all your stat points into this one class, then you're disregarding a class on AI, which is then potentially way more relevant and way more useful to the future generation, you know? So yes, you know, to answer your question, yes, just because I think the bar to entry, it's not set that you need an inherent ability to sketch. Yes, it's great that you have these skills, but industrial design is so broad now. Are you a good programmer? Are you a good model maker? Are you a good, you know, fabricator? Are you a good, you know, lateral thinker and a problem solver? So industrial designers, we're not one thing, but it's so funny that industrial design inherently is attached to sketching, you know? It is a legacy, but it is also these icons of our industry, but also I think it's way too, the lens is way too big on sketching, you know. It's definitely more important. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent, and I'd love to get your perspective on this. And going back to that little thing that we just talked about, where it doesn't get talked about. In my teaching, the interesting thing that I'm starting to hone and to ask the students is like, have you ever been taught how to tell a story, or what is your ability to deliver a compelling narrative, you know? And I would argue, in this modern world, if you want to work in design or at a high-level design, your ability to tell a compelling narrative is way, way, way more important than your ability to sketch a car, you know? Because, you know, the ability to structure a narrative means that you have a thought process, and then you're not only then going to present a concept, you have the ability to understand that for this concept to land, you have to describe it, tell it in a journey, bring the client on board, sell it to the stakeholders, you know, convincing in a compelling way that, yes, there are a whole bunch of unknowns, but trust me, because of this strong narrative that I'm going to bring through. So yeah, that's a very sort of obscure thing to say, but once again, I think storytelling, a narrative telling, a narrative generation, it's so critical. But they don't really tell it. They don't really teach it. And these are the things you can only learn on the job, or you've been forced to, or you work in marketing and you see way more value in narratives than actually, But as an industrial designer, and to all junior designers, work on your storytelling, man, because that is going to be such a powerful tool. And this is the unique thing and the odd thing about industrial design. It's one thing to generate something and an idea and come up with a concept and to say that this is going to be great. If you can sell the idea, we're then also beholden by the need to execute that idea. It's one thing to say that, I've got this beautiful concept of this mechanism and this thing that does this thing, and then it generates that. Yeah, it's like me saying, I would love a flying car because we can get to X and A to B and blah, 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 and there's no blah, blah, blah. But we, right now, in this epoch of time, we need to still be able to make it. We still need to be able to engineer it and design it and fabricate it and all this sort of stuff. So, yes, massive ability to storytell is amazing and useful, but also you have to couple that with the ability to execute that idea. And I think once you have those two things, intention, that's what really generates good design, because you're confident to deliver it, but then you're also confident in your understanding to be able to execute it as well. So storytelling. I think I'd gone on a lot of tangents,
I think it's a very valid point.
Yeah.
I think a lot of time people can get lost in sketching being the thing that everyone's missing, or design for manufacturing is a big one that people talk about, that people are missing who come out of university. But like storytelling is maybe not as tangible, maybe the value of storytelling, but it is actually very important, even from a perspective of communicating design as value, or even communicating your role as a designer. Like, for example, when I first started my role, I made mistakes, but in a way, those mistakes, they helped me learn. And like, when you think of a story has complications. A story has hurdles that the protagonist has to overcome to be able to, ultimately save the damsel in distress. I don't know. You know what I mean? But like,
That's right.
You need those barriers to develop yourself and become better in your role, and maybe make that successful product. There has to be some areas that you struggled in, and then that ultimately developed the final result.
And I think in to that point around struggle, and struggle in design is a very unique thing, where I don't know how to describe it. It's struggle, it's friction. Friction generates good ideas, because you're not just in a vacuum dictating your own thing. A client, they paying you to do the design, but they need your skills, so therefore they impart things, and then you as a designer, you go, oh man, what do they think, what are they saying, they don't understand, but they are the client, they're the one allowing you to do this. So there inevitably is this friction, and people see that as a negative, but then I really think, I'm a firm believer that friction generates good design, because to that point, it's a resultant of things. It's the 1 + 1 = 3. That's a perfect example where two separate people have diametrically opposed objectives, because you want to do the best design, but the client wants to be the cheapest design to some degree, and from that the middle ground lands. So to that idea that it has to have these unknowns and lost my train of thought, but I think it's not a negative in a sense, because it could be used as a positive, but to that communication piece, it's definitely useful, and what the narrative arms you with is not just being cold and calculating and just saying, as specific to industrial design, it's like, if we tool it this way, then it's going to be expensive and it's going to be really challenging. But imagine then you can then guide the client through saying, look, right now, this is the perfect, I'm going to use the direct example from my work right now. We're balancing, do I design for mass manufacturing, traditional injection molding, which, yes, we can and we should, and we have ambitions to be the best. But right now, strategically, it doesn't serve us, so we have to have the ability and create a narrative to go, not yet, but trust me, and this is the narrative I'm going to deliver to you for you to trust me that I am going to execute it in a specific way, but it has an outcome and there's a reason. and the narrative is still strong, and we can still serve your core intention to help people, but we need to pivot from this economic model of striving for this level, which we're not ready yet. But imagine, being a junior designer, go, no, we do CNC, and they go, why? And then if you don't have that ability to navigate that narrative or to generate that piece of communication to instill confidence, but then also the ability to rationalize it, then you're just going, well, friction. It's just friction for the sake of friction, There's no useful outcome of that friction. It's just anxiety inducing. So going back, but this is the interesting thing I find about you, because you studied marketing as well, didn't you? Yeah. So and once again, and just to finish this bit out, it's not taught to a high level, that to my knowledge, but it is so useful. But other industries really put value in it, like marketing. They trade on it, so people sell it, so why don't we as industrial designers bring some of that on? And maybe that's the limiter. That's the thing where we're not fully drinking headily from this deep well cup and getting drunk on it. We still have to be sober to go, well, it's one thing to sell a vision. We still got to execute it. We still got to be able to make it. It's one thing to say, once again, that car analogy, a flying car, great, but how do we do it? Within these points that's going to cause a lot of friction.
And that's a big lesson for young designers moving into the industry. Like, that was a massive lesson for me, that like a lot of the time my crazy ideas aren't possible, or they're just not like going to be made because no one can be bothered, kind of thing.
And also I would challenge anyone that ever says your ideas aren't valid or possible, because also, well, what environment are you in, and were you put in an environment where heap of responsibility was on you, not only to come up with the idea, to make it valid, and once again, maybe this is the structure of the industry. Maybe there needs to be a re-examination. Well, you have to invest in these juniors, but then you can't shit on them for not knowing years and years and years of DFM experience. Maybe we have to recognize where the strength is and then hone those skills and go, I love your thinking, I love your thought process, I love your ability to craft this AI thing, but we still need to now reinvest in them to go and teach them and go, this is why it's shit, this is why it's not going to work, this is why, within this context of traditional injection molding. So I think, that needs to change. And to be fair too, man, like when I was in my early days of doing consultancy work, I worked in some really harsh studios, like really harsh, and it was purely sink or swim. And I guess the way that I am now is, it's like I've experienced bad mentors, and I was like, man, that is just not used for anyone, Then, so I think there is a lot to be said about how people treat juniors and how do they communicate to students, where they're just standing from a point of authority. It's one thing to say no to something, but it's like, well, what's the alternative here? I'm always a firm believer that you never say no to something without offering an alternative, offering a solution. And a lot of people are inflicted by that. So, So I think, don't to any of those juniors listening now, don't get discouraged, because there's value in what you do. It's just that you're not there yet. But don't take too many of those hits, and don't take them on too hard, too much. I've been guilty of it, man. I'm a late in life designer, as what I say, a late in life designer, because my consultancy or my sort of hardcore design experience came fairly late. And like I said, I was doing drafting and working in mining. I came straight out of study and didn't get a job in any design industry, but then I started doing drafting, and that was when mining money was huge, and I've been doing that for way too long. And then I got really discouraged, because I'm like, man, I'm just drawing freaking things, I'm just doing nuts and bolts and doing trusses and big mining machinery, and got quite despondent. But then I was still practicing, I was still doing my own projects, and I was still doing little jobs for people, something. But then a big opportunity comes up, and to all junior designers, opportunities arise all the time. You're just not ready for it sometimes. And luckily enough, because I genuinely believe in it, I was doing it when the opportunity presented itself. I was like, man, I'm ready, I'm match fit, I'm doing this anyway. So great, someone's going to pay me to do it, then it's ready. So so just to round it all out, then you don't need permission, but then also keep doing it. You don't need to have a reason to do it apart from this intrinsic desire to do design, and I think that's the distinguisher between a good designer and a bad designer as well, from a junior point of view. Whenever I see a junior designer, it's like, what are you working on? What are you interested? You know, what are you tinkering with? What are you obsessed with? And it doesn't matter what it is, because industrial design is so broad. Oh, great, you love 19th century pottery, you know, and you'll try to replicate your own pottery. I was like, fantastic, because you are engaged in the process. You're expressing yourself somehow. That's useful, you know. Now we're going to chuck you into glass blowing and injection.
And they're those
whatever,
little skills that you can bring to the consultancy team one day. Like, you know, like when that project comes up and they yell out to the room, who knows pottery, 19th century pottery, there's going to be that guy. And it's like, if you're just sitting there playing video games or doing something that maybe isn't directly related to, that doesn't benefit industrial design at all, you know, you're really missing out in those experiences.
Yeah. And it's just being despondent, and you're just harboring negativity, because then you go, well, no one's giving me a job, no one's allowing me to practice, because it's like, well, you can practice. You know, with all the tools these days, once again, with the AI and tools and access to everything, and you can send things to get made, there's no reason not to do it.
Get a 3D printer, you can make your own products right in front of you.
Exactly. But we're still stuck in this paradigm of like saying, well, it is prestigious to work in in-house teams and consultancies, so therefore they're the things I have to strive to. So if it doesn't pay off, then why am I doing it? And I've been guilty of that in my early days. But once again, I'm a late in life designer, so it's been really interesting coming to that a very mature state in my practice, and then sort of going, well, man, it is a bit of a hustle. It's a bit of a game, you know, to a degree. So, and I think people fall in those traps. But yeah, at the end of the day, designers make and think and, you know, and produce and just tinker. And I think, just do that. And you don't need permission to do it. And then an opportunity will come and you'll be ready for it.
It is a bit of a hustle. It's interesting you say that. Like even like consultancy work, like I don't know. I mean, I haven't worked in a consultancy, but when you meet a lot of these people who run consultancies, you know, they're kind of like gangsters of their era in a way. Like they're pretty ferocious people, and it's probably because they have to be like that to survive in, you know, the quite difficult environment.
Yeah, true. But also, you know, I've been lucky enough to meet you know, a good sampling of people. You know, you've had Nathan on, you know, kind of, he's one of the coolest guys around, you know. So, but he's doing it very, very well. And I used to practice at Vert with Andrew, one of the smartest guys I know, you know. So, they're all, the thing is, I guess, you know, to that point, when you're working in consultancy, business takes economics, you know. And sometimes it's harsh, you know, having to worry about economics and do that stuff. And sometimes that stuff doesn't gel with just the fundamental ambition to create something and to produce something wonderful. But then, it's business, it's work. And it's almost, this is the cruel irony, because it's like, I've got my own projects that I'm passionate about, but it's very hard to do it because there's no external impetus, and it's all just internal, you know, and you're putting it off and you never really give it that much attention. But when you're in a consultancy, someone's paying you, you do it, you know, because you're getting paid to do it. But yeah, you have to be, it is harsh and it is ruthless. And the thing that always razz the students about is, you know, like every term or a new fresh set of students, it's like, oh, you got a project coming. How many projects you got coming up? Oh, you got 2? Oh, how's that making you feel? You're a little bit anxious about that? I was like, if you ever work in a consultancy, that's all the time.
Until you have like 10 projects once.
All the time. That's it. It's like you finish one, there's another one all the time, because you've signed up to this, because it is just, you know, it is a hustle. But I also think that's where, you know, industrial designers, and it's really interesting observing it from my vantage point, that I think industrial design is also very intrinsically motivated. You know, what I mean by that is that we reward ourselves by the work and the outcome. And I can say, hand on heart, about good 90, 80% of the designers that I know, they genuinely love the process and love the work. And that's fulfilling enough. And that goes back to our very first point, where it's hard, you know, because, you know, I don't promote myself. And I see that's a big thing in industrial design, because we're just inherently satisfied to some degree, you know, when something is executed and you do a good product and someone's using it, man, there's no higher buzz, you know. So it's amazing that something from a sketch now evolves into a thing that people are interacting and at the best state they love and they bond with, and that's just amazing, you know. So industrial design,
it's funny, like what you're saying, how, you know, you feel like you don't promote yourself maybe as much as other people. And it's like, I
Mm,
mean, I've studied marketing, so I feel like I was very much aware of
mm,
the benefit of marketing yourself and the importance. Like,
mm,
what do they
mm, mm,
say? Like
mm.
in marketing, it's like when you go for a job, you're not applying for a job, you're selling yourself to them, kind of thing. Like that's the attitude you need to
Yep,
have. Like
yep.
you're not getting a job from them; they're getting a worker from you. and
Yeah,
and
that's
it's like
true.
these
Yeah,
these kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
attitudes is like you don't really get taught that in design, and a lot of designers they're really really good at what they're doing, and I see this all the time. Like
Yep,
one of my friends
yep,
that works, Stuart.
yep,
I don't know if he wants me to talk about him on here, but
yep,
he's really really nice guy and really but
yep,
really like really really good at what he does. But he's not social in the
yep,
same way. Like he's not going to be out there promoting
yep,
his work online. He's designing
yep,
sky
yep,
signs
yep,
for like ANZ and like these massive Macquarie Bank sky
yep,
signs, like
yep,
crazy stuff.
yep,
But I
yep,
said to him, I'm like, you got to get an Instagram going, put this up online. But he just doesn't want to do it because
yep.
he doesn't have that motivation. And like, I feel like a lot of designers kind of are like that. Like, some people will get all the limelight, not even because they're necessarily better, because
Yep.
they have that PR attitude.
Yep. Yep. Oh man, and this is the thing. And once again, and um, uh, uh, it's once again exactly this. For me, I'm of the age where I'm not a digital
Mm,
native. I'm right on the cusp of that, so I wrestle with
mm,
that all the time. It's like, what do you share? Are you not sharing enough? Are you not communicating enough? You can see the conflict I'm constantly, because I see the value in
mm,
narratives, but then if I'm not crafting my own narrative on the
mm,
social media stage, then are you not then doing what you're practicing? But it's really difficult. And once again, I don't have any answer to it. I'm one of the probably worst people
yeah,
to discuss social media stuff. But at the same time, having said that, I've gotten so much connection through
mm,
Instagram, but I don't really care for it that much, or I don't
mm,
foster it. It's not something that I post maybe once every three,
mm,
4 months, if that. But there is benefit to it. But I think going back to that point, maybe it just I'm too biased because it's my own archetype. I see a lot of people, especially the designers, good
mm,
designers I know, they're just inherently
mm,
satisfied, and the anxiety only comes when it's like looking at
mm,
outwards, looking at what other people are doing. But then I also think, this has been proven. It's just a fallacy. It's almost creating your own narratives, and it's
mm,
problematic. It's problematic. So at the end of the day, there is no right and wrong, and some people are doing
mm,
really well, and I think also some people are not doing enough. And it is finding that balance.
mm.
Once again, it's all balance, and what's the purpose of it all. So yeah, it's really difficult. But yeah, you're right on the cusp, because you was it taught to you when you went through school that this is a part,
Um,
that you need
Not
to
really, to be
promote
honest.
yourself, or
No,
you
not in
need to.
design.
Mm,
In marketing, it was
mm.
more like build your LinkedIn network, and like that's how you're gonna get your
Oh
jobs in the
man, yeah,
future. Like I feel like in marketing, it was very much pushed, but in industrial design, I feel like it wasn't necessarily like we spoke about Behance and Instagram and stuff like that, but
that's it.
the value of it wasn't necessarily communicated as much as I feel like maybe it should have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's just triggered something in me, and one thing you'll never hear in IDX, in the context of IDX, is the word
Mm.
networking and IDX. You will never hear those words ever, because I just fundamentally, there's too much baggage in
Really?
the word networking. But then again, but having said that, even though the baggage is there is still value
Mm.
in it, But then what I'm interested in is like, well, what is the
Mm.
value? What is that sketching
Mm.
analogy? What is this core thing that is valuable here? And at the end of it is
Mm.
connection. We want to connect with people. We want to find community. Yes, you can call community building, networking, or whatever, and it is. But at the same time, I think they're the interesting things where you go, well, it's a truth. How do we repurpose it? How do we make it less
Mm.
negative, or less too much baggage? How do we jettison the baggage? And you just look at the honesty at it. So they're the opportunities, and they're the things that I find really interesting once you stumble across it. But to that point,
Mm.
specific to networking, yeah, it's
Mm.
connection. And I would encourage any listener who, like me, 10 years ago, was very difficult, and I found it very challenging. I love talking to people, and I was inherently an introvert. But then it's like the mental shift. It's like when I heard the word networking, I was like, man, where do I begin? Do I need to go to a conference? Do I need to freaking wear a badge? Do I need to go that? But it's this idea now. I think you need to mentally shift that and make it work for you by telling yourself it's not
Mm.
networking, it's
Yep.
connecting. Where are these points of connection? Who are the people that you can reach out to. And I would encourage anyone now, like if they're interested in speaking to me, I'm all for it, you know, like reach out to me and have a chat. I love a chat. So, but then that's an open call. It's not saying, man, let's network, let's do some stuff, you know, let's get some things going, because it just has a lot of these negative vibes about it. But then, yeah, connection, it is networking. But if we put it in that way where we're just trying to find community, then and it just makes it a lot more accessible and a lot more forgiving, where it's not so hyper. It is not tied up towards economics, and it's not tied up towards striving and hustling. It's just, you know, here's a cool community of people. Oh man, you have challenges too. Oh, you know, and I always find it really interesting when I speak to industrial designers at a certain level, and I tell this story all the time. When you get to a certain level of practice or skill ability, it's really interesting to speak to other designers, because you inevitably don't talk about the skill application. You talk about the traumas of the work, the issues, like what's a dodgy client, what's a dodgy project, you know, what's a dodgy software, you know, it's, you know, SolidWorks, you know, like wrestling with those things, you know. I find that really interesting, because they're the things that bond you even harder, because they're the, you know, it's the irony where the negative aspects forge a stronger connection between the people. So when you talk about, you know, networking, quote unquote, I've always loved speaking to people. Yeah, I know you can do it. You know, you're practicing on your own, but what are the issues that you're having? You know, what are the troublesome things about being in it?
That's my week right there. This week, I had so many issues with SolidWorks. I had like my drawings, every time I saved, they were crashing for days, and I was like, what is wrong with this? And
can we shit on SolidWorks? You don't have any affiliations with them or anything like that?
And then finally I find out there's just some tick box that's for some reason not ticked anymore on my computer, and it was just performance crashing my computer.
It's the I don't know, it's like a necessary evil. But then again, you know, it's a tool. It's a tool that's, but once again, going back to that there has never been a better time. When I was going through studying, SolidWorks or Invented, they were like the one or two, man, and then Fusion started rolling out, but now Onshape's coming on. So these engineering level stuff that is, you know, get you pretty far down the road is so accessible. Whereas back then, students were locked in, you know, you're almost like, they train, it's like a drug, you know, it's free when you're a student, but then they train you and they get you hooked on it. So therefore, professionally, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But there's no better time to be an industrial designer or design in general, because there's so many tools. You go on YouTube, man, guys are creating amazing things, you know, and they're teaching it. And yeah, YouTube as a resource, far out, you know, like it's so much knowledge that being disseminated now. It's never been a better time. So yes, we are still in the age of AI, but then we're also in an age of where ignorance is a choice, you know, where if you want to learn photography, I learned photography on YouTube. If you really care about something, you can find the information so readily, and to generate and create something, it's never been a better time. So yeah, it's funny that, but yeah, I don't know, man, these skills. But then again, you know, bragging on SolidWorks, you know, it's one of the, once again, this thing, I've spent so much time honing my skills and wrestling with it. I hate it, but then there's a sick appreciation to be able to bend it to your will.
It's so clunky in some ways, but like if you really know how to do it,
it's
you
a jack of all trades.
and maneuver it into whatever you want to do with it. Like at the moment, I'm learning like master sketching, and you know, like top-down modeling in SolidWorks from master sketching.
Oh man,
but it's like,
speak to me, Roman. This is my jam.
I still think it's really dodgy trying to do it in SolidWorks compared to Fusion, like how simple it is. But I don't know, there's some satisfaction about how clunky it is and getting it to work in that way you want.
Yeah, and then also, but then you push your skills, and then you go, well, one of the traps I always see with junior designers, it's one thing, once again, to connect it back to sketching, we're now in an age where junior designers are designing to their capabilities. You know, what I mean by that is, if you say that, please design me a handle for a hairbrush, they would want something beautifully sculpted and ergonomic with Class A surfacing, but their CAD ability does not afford them the ability to do it, you know, because they're just going, it's not right, it's really difficult, and they waste all their budgeted time trying to create these Class A surfaces and everything like that. But that's just the new sketching, you know, because at the same time, you know, we're limited by our skills. But having said that, if you wrestle through it and you push through it and you find good mentors that sort of structure it in a way and guide you through it, that's the better way to do it. And then, yeah, to that point, to your camera analogy where you're learning and wrestling with it, definitely, SolidWorks is, or any 3D software, it's this weird, incredible thing where I'm all for what is it, like a CAD hygiene, where I like to keep things very neat, very precise. Guys hate it when I put things in folders. I got literally told off the other day, but I love it. Just like keeping everything really concise and making all my sketches robust. That's also craft. That's stuff that no one will ever know outside of the industry. But that takes effort. That takes skill. That is the modern version of being able to hone your own plane and sharpen it and tune it and things like that. So there is value in those things, and I think where it's a disservice to students, they just get lumped with it, say you need to learn this because you need this to do the work. They're not really told about the elegance of it. There's a new way of thinking, the structure, how you do this. Because if you set up this sketch one right, if you do a very strong parametric sketch, man, you can flood it across all your concepts. By changing a couple of parameters, then you build right and you build cleverly. And then it just streamlines it, and it's just, you're so much more creative, because then you can just go boom, 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 boom. And we're still working in a digital realm, the modern example of sketching. So there's benefits of that, and hopefully that's the stuff that being a practicing designer, that I can communicate directly to students and say, don't worry about the annoyances of it. There's value in it. There's benefits if you are setting out right. So yeah,
that's great. I suppose the biggest thing about education is it's very hard to teach a well-balanced industrial design degree these days. Like for example, my job is maybe, it's not, I'm not working in the modern day necessarily with my role at the moment. Like it's more like the, fundamental, like in industry, industrial design, in manufacturing, weldments, sheet metal fabrication, all that kind of stuff. Pretty much none of what I learned at uni was like preparing me for this job, because uni teaches you the 2023 industrial design into the future. And like there's definitely a place for that, but there's also a place, like realistically, most students aren't going to go out of uni into a consultancy role. Like they're going to go into a more functional role where they're going to learn those fundamental skills that they can one day take into the consultancy role. So as a academic, it must be very hard to teach a balanced education for all those different people.
And once again, I must put a massive preface in the way that I teach, because I'm not there full time. It's not my primary function, but I see the amazing work that the tutors or the head lecturers and the professors do. It's a really tough gig, because it is trying to communicate really dense and esoteric things to a generation of students. But for me, and this is where it's kind of a bit of a cheat for me, because I'm just like the fun drunk uncle that comes in and just sort of tells you, what to do and what not to do, and just I'm gone, But having said that, there is a responsibility to communicate, and sort of give a balance. And hopefully the thing that I try to focus on if I'm looking at balance is trying to give a realistic view of things. It is this thing to say that, CAD's annoying, but if you do it this way and that, but then to your point, most kids coming out won't work in consultancy. The lucky few that will, if they want to. The amount of times I've been asked, should I work in-house or should I work in a consultancy, and over the years, I've wrestled with this question, but I can't remember who said it, but the best thing that I've ever heard was that, and this is part of my teaching as well, it's like, well, there's ways to understand it. There's the thing called the 3 Ps, where it's process, product, and problem. So if you're ever questioning, well, do I work in a startup, do I work in a consultancy, or do I work in an in-house team? Think about it as 3 Ps, To work in a consultancy, you're all about process. You have to stack your process. To work in-house, then you have to really focus on the product, because then, if you work for, say, Breville, then you're product-based, then you are working on blenders or toasters, and then you are going to be product-focused. But then there's an alternative where it's like, well, if you work in, there's another one, you can work in a startup, then you're addressing a problem. So that's the way that I sort of structure it, try to get to the students to go, well, don't think about this, it's homogeneous mass. There is nuance and there is structure within there. So don't, if you really, really set on consultancy work and you really love the challenge and the diversity, then you have to be strong in your process. You have to be able to design for prototyping, design for manufacturing, concept out, do narration and do narrative processes. But then also, if you really set on working in-house in a big team, then you really have to have a good interpersonal skills, really solid, robust technical skills, because they're going to drill you on that, or they're going to train you on that. But then also, if you just really want to be a great communicator and just live in the unknown, work in a startup. and focus on the problem and sort of then wrestle with the problem and bring your expertise as an industrial designer to go, hey, I'm uncomfortable in this uncertainty, but then, what is the problem morphing into? So yeah, from that balance point of view, they're the things that I like to sort of try to communicate. It's definitely not convenient to fit it into a syllabus, because it's not like now Ed talks about this, and this is what we're going to spend the lecture on. Sometimes you just have to find these opportunities where you can see a student struggling, or they're out, and then we're at a graduation exhibition, and you actually get to talk more freely. And once again, the IDX, we've opened it up to students, and that's the opportunity to have these more free-flowing, less rigid conversations where they get to ask these things that they feel like it could be a silly question, They could feel like, oh, it's a stupid question. Why would it? I was like, no silly questions. And we're in this environment where we can have a genuine, loose, honest discussion. And they're the things that I hope I can bring back into the classroom, but then not have to be so rigid about it. So yeah, that's my ambition, to find balance, or how to bring some value, fundamentally value, how I bring value to the teaching that I do. Yeah. So and students really respond to it. They really, from all accounts, appreciate the thing. It may not be what they want to hear, but at least you deliver it in a very honest, unbiased way. So, and I think that always trumps anything. There's so yeah. But yeah, teaching is hard. It's I'm doing more and more of it. I hope I want to do more of it. But yeah, it's a different thing. But then I'm a firm believer in that thing where you learn something, you repeat something, you teach something, and then you're hopefully on your way to mastering it. So for me, that's a selfish sort of strategy as well, because I've learned it, I've repeated it quite a bit. Now, hopefully, then if I can communicate it and repeat it to teach it to a student, then somewhat on the road that reinforces me that I've gone some way into mastering it myself. So, for those people, those negatives, my mates, when I told them, I'm going to do more teaching, that common joke is always like, oh, those who can't do teach. You always hear that, and I think that is such a big disservice to all teachers. And it's a common thing, and maybe it's just a throwaway line. But yeah, I like to challenge anyone, who's ever thought about it. Treat it like that, You learn, repeat, teach.
Teaching isn't for everyone as well. I think it lends itself towards a certain personality, and maybe not everyone in the professional field would ever be able to be a teacher. It's a skill in itself.
That is true. And I think that's where the opportunity, you don't need to be standing in front of a classroom to teach, but then if we use that little ladder frame, the learn, repeat, teach, master, but, maybe look for that and foster the next generation. When there is an opportunity to talk to a junior designer, don't be a dirtbag. Just freaking, be chill and go, hey man, like, how's it going? Yeah, we'll try this, This is the thing that I've noticed, and I think that only helps in, once again, this overarching ambition is to, once we raise, a rising tide raises all boats, that kind of a mentality, and hopefully, this rounds out this conversation, that ties in my philosophy. What we're trying to do with IDX is this idea that, especially in Australia, I hear a lot speaking to with people. It's good and bad, but fundamentally, everyone thinks Australia is small and there's not enough potential work or clients to go around, which is true to a degree. But then at the same time, instead of looking internally and going, well, there's a limited pool of clients, so therefore we're all wrestling against this studio, so therefore we don't talk to them, we don't do this, and that just sort of fractures the community. But inverse to that, the whole ambition of this community connection stuff is like, well, if we do a good job in doing those three things that we set out to get, collaboration, connection, and education, if we educate 1% of the Australian population, which is like 260,000 people or something like that, if we get them to understand that industrial design is what they need, and they actually understand that industrial design is a service and is actually valuable, man, that's just 260,000 more potential clients or potential work, where it wasn't being communicated, it wasn't being even promoted. If we're looking at, here's the pie, so therefore we all have to fight the pie. It's like, well, why aren't we growing the pie? And we just need to grow the pie by being better communicators and selling and letting people know, wow, holy crap, industrial designers, they can do all these cool stuff, and they know how to strategize and then have budgets and also do make beautiful things that people want and actually can use. So I think that's also the overarching ambition of not only myself, but also for the community group, is just to educate people. Like, there is industrial designers and it's cool because of these amazing reason.
When I spoke to Dan Armstrong on the podcast, one of the things he said really stuck with me. He was talking about how consultancies need to work together for success and how they strengthen each other working together. And his analogy was in Canberra, there's this one road where there's like 20 coffee shops all on one road. And, you'd think it was a bad thing because it means that, there'd be too much competition. But what they found was actually it meant that everyone was making really good coffee because they were like kind of competing. But also, when someone wanted to get a coffee, they knew where to go. Everyone went to this street to get coffee because it's the best coffee you're going to get. So it's like, it's not going to necessarily have a negative effect on the industry working together. They actually might improve and maybe it would put design in Australia on the map globally as great design. Well, I mean, more than it already is. And people internationally might be more looking towards Australian design, instead if we work together.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's the ripe opportunity. But once again, look at geographically, we're in a very unique position. We are so close to the Asian manufacturing base of the Western context and, with all this lineage and history and service-based skills and everything. So, we're in a beautiful position. And also Australia is safe, some people might equate safe to boring, which it is true to a degree, but also we're very stable. So therefore, from I remember in the pandemic, man, working at the time, there were the amount of so many people coming back, onboarding all their things that they were getting made overseas. That was just a big reassessment going, well, if we're operating out of here, what is the stability that we need strategically that serves our business? Australia fulfills that goal. And I think, there is always going to be opportunity to grow this industry and to sort of promote. But I think that comes back to communication because what has been there? What has been the narrative? If we are already stumbling at the hurdle when we say industrial design, and people go, well, what is that? We've already failed before we even began. So hopefully, through this community and through speaking to you and you're doing a great thing about promoting industrial design. It's like, hey man, there's some really talented, passionate, clever and skilled people that can not only make beautiful objects, that they can solve genuine problems. And I've been lucky enough to transition away where the work that I like doing now is more around big social enterprise problems, like how to solve social issues. But what I mean by social issues, you're never going to solve like homelessness to a degree, Yes, but industrial design can lend genuine empathetic thinking and strategic thinking to a lot of these problems. But to me, from my context, it's like, well, if there's a problem that can be addressed through a physical mean, what is that? Or an artifact mean, And I think there's a lot of those opportunities, But then at the same time, industrial designers I know of have transitioned to be more strategic thinkers and they're CEOs of businesses and companies, but they still use those skills of just empathizing with the person, asking these fundamental questions, balancing it with strategy and balancing it with the realities, the material realities of the world that we're in, and then sort of coming up with an interesting third outcome. And I think that's really cool and where industrial design is an amazing resource that is so underutilized.
Well, so thank you so much for coming on today, Ed. It's really nice to have someone out there trying to promote community around industrial design, and I hope more people in the industry can kind of create their own podcasts or create their own meetup groups and not be deterred by any sort of social credit in the design space, and just be proactive. And that's how we're going to really create that community and that culture around design.
And also just to leave it, once again, please, anyone reach out, always love a chat. But to the idea, I'm all about fostering the next generation, and that's hopefully carried through in my teaching, but also community building. But it is idea, just reach out and make suggestions and foster, and because you were there once, but then also for the juniors, you don't need permission. You don't need someone to say you can do it now. You have so much access to things, so have the ability to craft your own narrative, craft your own path, and just do it. And then when the opportunity arises, you will be so match fit, so ready, and then you're already doing it anyway. So even if you don't get it, then you're inherently, intrinsically motivated to keep doing it anyway.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I wish you all the best with the future of IDX, and I hope to see you in an event soon.
Yeah, thanks, man. So reach out, a shout out to anyone else. Hook us up on LinkedIn, and so hopefully we'll have more events coming up. But thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Have a good one. Enjoy your weekend.